always asked myself when I was younger, why couldn't future Gohan ascend to Super Saiyan 2 against the androids in the future timeline, whereas young Gohan managed to transform during the Cell games? This is a pretty interesting topic to discuss, and one that ties into the circumstances, the emotional triggers, and training opportunities of the two characters. While both versions of Gohan shared the potential for immense power, their vastly different experiences and emotional states created a divergence in their abilities. Not to mention, of course, the elephant in the room, the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. So the first point that I'd like to talk about is that the lack of a proper emotional trigger was present. Long story short, Gohan didn't really have that emotional trigger and long enough time to really reach that next level, whereas in the Cell games he did. Super Saiyan 2 is typically unlocked by a combination of an intense emotional turmoil and overwhelming need. Young Gohan first achieved the form during the Cell games when he witnessed Android 16's death and the suffering of his friends. This event created an explosive mix of rage, sadness, and desperation, finally pushing Gohan beyond his limits and awakening Super Saiyan 2. Future Gohan, on the other hand, fought in a very different emotional context. While his life was filled with despair due to the androids ravaging Earth, this hopelessness lacked the kind of immediate, personal tragedy that could serve as the final trigger. He was already accustomed to loss, having seen countless friends and allies die, including Piccolo, Krillin, and the other Z fighters, along with his dad. While tragic, this prolonged suffering may have numbed him emotionally, making it harder for him to experience the kind of raw, unfiltered rage that young Gohan experienced during the Cell games when the stakes were at their highest. In essence, future Gohan lacked the singular defining moment of emotional release that young Gohan experienced when he saw Android 16 killed in cold blood. Another factor here is the absence of adequate training and mentorship. In the main timeline, Gohan trained extensively with Goku in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber before the Cell games. This intense, focused training unlocked Gohan's deeper potential, priming him for the emotional breakthrough that led to Super Saiyan 2. Future Gohan, however, had no such luxury. He was essentially the last Z fighter standing, fighting under war against the androids. With no access to the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, no mentor like Goku to guide him, and no opportunity for focused training, future Gohan's growth was stunted. His power as a Super Saiyan was impressive, but it was never fully cultivated to the level required for him to access Super Saiyan 2. Future Gohan spent much of his energy fighting to survive, rather than training to grow stronger. His focus wasn't on surpassing his limits, it was on keeping himself and Trunks alive in a hostile world. This limited his ability to unlock the higher transformations that come from sustained, intense training. The next thing I want to discuss is the weight of isolation and responsibility that he had. His psychological state played a significant role in limiting his ability to achieve Super Saiyan 2. Unlike Gohan, who trained alongside Goku and the other Z fighters, future Gohan was isolated and burdened by the responsibility of being Earth's last defender. This responsibility likely created mental barriers, as Gohan was constantly under pressure to protect Trunks and fight the androids rather than focusing on pushing his limits. In the Cell games, young Gohan was able to rely on his father and allies, giving him the freedom and the time to fight without the crushing weight of total responsibility of a sudden death match. When Goku ultimately sacrificed himself, it pushed Gohan to step up, but he still had the emotional support of those around him. Future Gohan, in contrast, carried the weight of an entire world on his shoulders, with no one to lean on. Even if he did kill the androids, there wasn't really anything he could do. The difference in emotional burden likely impacted their ability to achieve the clarity needed to ascend to Super Saiyan 2, where young Gohan's emotions were directed outwards towards his friends and their suffering. Future Gohan's emotions were inwardly focused on survival and responsibility. Now, in the main timeline, Gohan had the luxury of time. He trained with Goku, he grew stronger, and then faced the androids and Cell after careful preparation. Future Gohan, however, lived in a timeline where the androids were constantly hunting him. This relentless pressure left little room for the kind of mental and emotional growth required to unlock Super Saiyan 2. It kind of begs the question is, why didn't Gohan ascend once, his mother was killed, or Goku, or Piccolo? I would say the constant battles with the androids likely drained future Gohan both physically and mentally. Without the ability to step back, recover, and reflect on his progress, it would have been nearly impossible for him to push past this Super Saiyan barrier to reach 2. Right? He didn't have Piccolo's early mentorship, he didn't have Goku's guidance in the Hyperbolic Time Chamber, and he didn't have that emotional trigger provided by the Cell games where he felt like he really needs to get his act together, otherwise everything is going to be lost. In the Android Saga in the future, he basically just had to survive, and he didn't have time to even try and fight back. He was probably just too afraid, I suppose, or shocked. So much of his latent power was quite untapped. So while I think, the natural talent was there, he lacked the tools and the circumstances to reach the same heights as his younger counterpart. I think one of the main things here is the Hyperbolic Time Chamber. That being said, I kind of feel like if the writers really wanted to, they could have written him to ascend to a different form. I just don't see how 2 wouldn't be possible after, Piccolo or Goku or Chi-Chi or anyone else that he cared about dying. Had future Gohan lived in a different timeline with maybe more training and support, it's possible he could have unlocked Super Saiyan 2. But in the tragic dystopian future that he had inhabited, his power remained limited by his circumstances, a testament to the harsh reality of the timeline that he fought to protect. I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments below about these 2 Gohans and why the younger one was able to ascend and save the world, whereas the future one failed. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.